I never thought the lowest moment of my life would happen in the house I paid for, standing in my own living room while someone else told me I didn't belong there. She wasn't a stranger, she was family, and when she picked up the phone and called the police on me, I realized silence had cost me more than I understood. If you've ever swallowed disrespect to keep the peace, you might recognize parts of yourself in what happened next. The day didn't start with tension. It started like most of my days in Atlanta do. Early traffic, a half-warm coffee in the cup holder, calls coming in before I even reached the office. Logistics doesn't wait for anyone. Freight delays, staffing gaps, numbers that have to line up no matter what mood you're in. I've done this long enough to know how to keep things moving without raising my voice. People rely on that. By the time I drove home that evening, my shoulders felt heavy in that familiar way. Not exhausted, just full of decisions, full of responsibility. The house came into view the same way it always had. 2 stories, nothing flashy. The kind of place you buy because it makes sense, not because you want to impress anyone. I'd been paying the mortgage for years, never missed a payment, never talked about it either. Inside, the noise hit first. The TV was louder than usual. My son's backpack sat in the hallway, unzipped, papers spilling out. My mother-in-law's voice carried from the kitchen before I even put my keys down. "You're late again." No hello, no pause. I said her name, calm, like I always did, and walked toward the fridge. She stood by the counter, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me like she'd been waiting all day. My wife was nearby, wiping down the table, not looking at either of us. "Dinner's been ready," she added. People who care about family don't stroll in whenever they feel like it. I checked the clock without saying anything. Traffic had been worse than usual. There was a wreck on I-20. I'd texted earlier. She knew that. When I headed down the hall to change, the bedroom door didn't open all the way. Something stopped it. I pushed again and felt resistance. She had locked it. "Why is the door locked?" "Because that room gets used when you're not here," she said, following me. "You come and go. I need privacy too." I stood there for a moment, hands still on the knob. That room held my clothes, my documents, things I didn't leave lying around. I didn't raise my voice. "That's not how this works." She laughed, short and sharp. "This is my daughter's house. I've been taking care of her long before you showed up." My son peeked out from his room, eyes flicking between us. My wife finally turned around. "Mom, maybe we can talk about this later." "Later never comes," she shot back. "Someone has to set rules." Rules. In my own hallway. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. She followed, pointing at the dresser. "And those papers? They shouldn't be out. You're confusing the child with adult problems." I folded a shirt that didn't need folding, gave my hands something to do. "Please don't go through my things." "Then don't leave them where I can see them." Dinner passed in clipped sentences. Forks scraped plates. My son ate fast, shoulders tight. When I corrected him gently about his homework schedule, she cut in. "He's fine. You don't need to micromanage everything." I looked at my wife. She stared at her food. The argument didn't explode. It never did. It just pressed forward, inch by inch, every sentence pushing a little harder than the last. When she questioned how I handled my money, I finally stood up. "I'm going for a walk." "Running away again?" she said. "Figures." I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The air felt cooler than I expected. The porch light hummed softly. I stood there longer than necessary, keys in my hand, listening to the muffled sounds inside the house. Something settled in my chest, heavy and clear at the same time. Silence wasn't keeping the peace anymore. It was erasing me, one unlocked door at a time. And as I walked down the driveway without looking back, that thought stayed with me longer than the night air on my skin. The walk didn't clear anything. By the time I came back, the house felt rearranged without a single piece of furniture moving. Voices stayed low, doors closed more carefully. Even the air between people seemed measured, like everyone was afraid of saying the wrong thing out loud. Breakfast the next morning passed with polite noise. Cups clinked. Someone asked about the weather. My mother-in-law watched me over the rim of her mug, then looked away when I met her eyes. My wife spoke less than usual, answering questions without adding anything of her own. My son finished eating and disappeared down the hall without asking for permission. No one mentioned the night before, but it lived in the pauses. Later that day, my phone buzzed while I was at my desk. A message from my sister-in-law popped up, casual on the surface. "Mom's been really stressed lately. You should try to be more understanding." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Understanding had become a one-way street. I typed a response, erased it, then slid the phone face down and went back to work. Meetings stacked up. Numbers needed fixing. A shipment arrived short, and someone had to own it. I handled it the same way I always did, quietly, methodically. That part of my life still worked. People listened. Decisions stuck. It felt strange how solid everything was there, compared to what waited at home. By midweek, the stories started reaching me indirectly. A neighbor nodded less warmly than before. Someone my wife knew asked if everything was okay, voice laced with curiosity. The word ungrateful floated through a conversation I overheard while unloading groceries. Apparently, I had forgotten where I came from. Apparently, I lived off my wife. Apparently, I didn't respect elders. None of it matched reality, but truth didn't seem to matter once a version caught traction. That evening, I corrected my son about leaving his shoes in the hallway. My mother-in-law stepped in before he could respond. "He's been through enough. You don't need to jump on him over small things." It wasn't about the shoes. It never was. I let it go anyway, guiding him toward his room with a hand on his shoulder. He glanced back at me, uncertain, like he was learning something without understanding what it meant yet. The fridge note system appeared the next day. Chores listed in handwriting that wasn't mine. Schedules adjusted without discussion. A suggestion that I coordinate financial decisions before making changes. I read it, folded the paper, and slipped it into my pocket. At work, my focus slipped in small ways. I double-checked things that didn't need it, missed a call, and had to apologize. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to remind me that pressure doesn't always announce itself. On Friday evening, I stopped at Walmart on the way home. Milk, bread, things no one else ever seemed to remember. The parking lot buzzed with people loading trunks, arguing over lists, calling kids back from wandering too far. As I walked toward my car, I heard my name. Marcus stood a few spaces over, leaning against his truck. We'd worked together years ago, before he moved into property management. We weren't close, but there was history there. Enough familiarity to skip pleasantries. "Didn't know you lived out this way," he said. "Short drive from home." He nodded, studying me in a way that didn't feel casual. "You look tired." I shrugged. Groceries went into the trunk. The metal clicked shut. Life does that. He waited a beat before speaking again. "I heard some things through mutual circles, family stuff." I didn't ask what things. Silence invited him to continue. "People talk," he said, usually wrong, sometimes loud. The wind pushed a shopping cart into a curb nearby. He watched it for a moment, then looked back at me. "Can I ask you something without you thinking I'm taking sides?" "Go ahead. Are you holding back because you think it's the right thing, or because you're afraid of what happens if you don't?" The question landed heavier than he probably intended. I leaned against the car, keys pressing into my palm. "I don't like chaos," I said. "Never have." "That's not what I asked." He wasn't smiling. Not judging either, just steady. "You've always been the guy who carries weight quietly," Marcus continued. "That works until everyone forgets it's heavy." I looked past him at the row of cars, people finishing their errands, heading back to whatever waited for them. "Sometimes peace costs more than conflict," he added. "Just depends on who's paying." We stood there without filling the space. He didn't offer advice, didn't tell me what to do. Eventually, he pushed off the truck. "Take care of yourself." The drive home felt longer than usual. When I walked through the door, conversation stopped mid-sentence. My mother-in-law gathered papers from the table, stacking them with purpose. My wife asked if I'd eaten. "Not yet." "There's food in the fridge." I nodded and moved past them. In the bedroom, the drawer where I kept important documents sat slightly open. Nothing obvious was missing, but the alignment felt off. I straightened the stack, then paused, fingers resting on the edge. From the kitchen, voices rose and fell. Familiar words rearranged into something else entirely. I stayed where I was, listening just long enough to recognize my name woven into a story I didn't recognize. And instead of stepping back out, I closed the drawer carefully and reached for my phone. The trash bins were still at the curb when I stepped outside the next morning. I rolled one back toward the garage, lid rattling, when a woman from 2 houses down slowed near the sidewalk. I'd seen her plenty of times. We'd exchanged nods, nothing more. "Hey," she said, not unkind, "just careful." I waited. "You doing okay?" she added. "I heard things got complicated over there." "Complicated how?" She hesitated, eyes shifting toward my house, then back to me. "People talk. Someone mentioned the paperwork on the house isn't actually in your name. That must be stressful." The words didn't hit all at once. They spread, quietly, like something spilled you don't see until it reaches your shoes. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," I said. She nodded too quickly, already backing away. "I hope so. Just wanted to say I'm praying for everyone involved." I dragged the bin the rest of the way without looking up again. Inside, my wife stood by the counter, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, then down again. "Did you talk to Mrs. Reynolds?" "Briefly. She worries too much." The mail lay stacked near the door. I noticed the envelopes had been opened. Not all of them, just the ones addressed to me. I picked one up, checking the tear. Why was this opened? My mother-in-law's voice carried from the living room. "Mail gets mixed up. Don't make it into something it's not." I didn't argue. I took the envelope into the bedroom, closed the door, and read the statement inside. Mortgage company logo, account summary, everything normal. Still, my hands lingered longer than necessary, smoothing the page flat. That afternoon, a delivery notification hit my phone. Certified mail. Someone had signed for it already, not me. At dinner, I asked about it. "It came earlier," my wife said. "Mom didn't want it sitting outside." "Where is it?" "She put it somewhere safe." "Where?" The fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I'll ask her." She didn't. Later that night, I searched through the usual drawer where documents lived. Fewer folders than before. Titles missing. I checked the hall closet, then the cabinet in the study. Nothing obvious. Everything felt slightly rearranged, like a hotel room after housekeeping comes through. Sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept circling the same thought, uncomfortable and unfamiliar. What if I'd been wrong about something fundamental? The next day, I stayed late at the office. Not because I had to, because quiet helps me think. Once the floor emptied out, I logged into my personal email and pulled up messages from years back. Closing dates, loan approvals, scans of signatures. I saved copies to a secure drive, labeling them by date, then backed them up again. At home, conversations shifted when I entered rooms. My son stopped asking me questions directly. Requests went through his grandmother first. When I suggested we review his school schedule together, she waved it off. He's already got enough structure. My wife avoided the conversation entirely, busying herself with chores that didn't need doing. One evening, I reached for the stack of bills near the kitchen desk. My mother-in-law placed her hand over them. "Those are handled." "By who?" "We're taking some pressure off you." The word "we" sat between us. I didn't ask for that. Sometimes people don't know when help is needed. I let my hand drop. The argument would have gone nowhere. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the Notes app, typing a few lines. Date, time, what was said, no commentary, just facts. That became a habit. Not dramatic, not paranoid, just quiet documentation. A line here, a screenshot there. I forwarded bank alerts to an address only I could access, changed a few passwords, nothing that announced itself. At work, Marcus's question replayed itself without permission. Was I holding back because it was right, or because it was easier than facing what came next? The answer didn't arrive all at once. A package showed up on the porch one afternoon. I recognized the return address immediately. Legal services. Before I reached it, my mother-in-law had already picked it up. "That's important," I said, "which is why I'll keep it safe. It's addressed to me. You're emotional lately. Let's not escalate things." I watched her carry it down the hall, set it inside her bedroom, and close the door. Something loosened then. Not anger, clarity. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and scrolled through photos of the house from the day I bought it. The inspection report, the keys laid out on the counter, me standing there alone, smiling in a way I hadn't in years. I'd kept those pictures without realizing why. From the living room, laughter drifted in. My name surfaced briefly, wrapped in a tone that wasn't meant for me to hear. I locked my phone, set it face down, and opened the laptop. The familiar layout of folders appeared. I added another. Clean. Labeled simply. I didn't feel like a homeowner in that moment, more like a guest who had overstayed without noticing the signs. The house creaked as someone walked overhead, and instead of calling out, I stayed where I was and kept typing, careful not to make a sound. The confrontation didn't wait for privacy. It met me at the edge of the driveway on a Saturday morning, right when neighbors were out watering lawns and loading trunks. I was carrying a box from the garage when her voice cut through the air, sharp enough to turn heads. "You don't get to make decisions like that." I set the box down slowly. She stood a few feet away, hands on her hips, already performing for an audience that hadn't asked to be part of this. "This house isn't yours to control," she continued. "I've let things slide out of respect, but I won't anymore." A man across the street paused mid-step. Someone else pretended to check their phone. "We can talk inside," I said. "No, we'll talk right here. I'm tired of pretending." She gestured toward the front door. "You come in late, you lock doors, you act like you own the place." I didn't answer right away. Silence stretched, uncomfortable but steady. "You don't," she added, "not really." The words were meant to sting. They landed, but not the way she expected. I picked the box back up. "Move, please." She scoffed and stepped aside, still talking as I passed. People should know what kind of man they're dealing with. Inside, I placed the box down and closed the door without slamming it. My hands felt calm, which surprised me. The noise stayed outside. I stayed inside. The story traveled faster than I did. By that afternoon, messages started arriving. Family members checking in with concern that didn't feel neutral. Friends asking if everything was okay, tone already tilted. One call stood out. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in months. "I hear you're having trouble providing stability," she said gently. "It happens. Pride gets in the way sometimes. I'm not sure what you've heard. Just that you're struggling, and that you don't like being reminded of your role." I ended the call before she could say more. That evening, I logged into our joint account to pay a bill and hit an error message. Tried again. Same result. A notification followed minutes later. Access updated. I checked another account. Locked. A third one followed. In the kitchen, I asked about it. "We thought it was better this way," my wife said without meeting my eyes. "Less stress for you." "By cutting me off?" "It's temporary." Her mother leaned against the counter. "You've proven you can't be trusted with big-picture decisions right now." I nodded once, then walked away. Arguing would have been easy. Proving them wrong required something else. At work the next week, things felt off. A vendor hesitated on a call, voice stiff. "I just want to confirm you're still authorized to approve this." "I am." We received a message suggesting changes might be coming. From who? I wanted to ask. I didn't. After hours, I sat alone at my desk and opened the folder I'd been building quietly. Statements, emails, screenshots, dates aligned. Numbers told a cleaner story than people ever did. At home, my name came up in conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Invitations arrived without me included. My son mentioned staying at his grandmother's longer, until things calmed down. I agreed without protest. Late one night, I checked my credit report. Nothing alarming yet, but a recent inquiry caught my attention. I wrote it down, added it to the list. The next morning, a neighbor avoided eye contact. Another offered a tight smile. "Heard things are tense," he said. "Hope it works out." I thanked him and kept walking. Back in the house, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The usual seat felt different now, like borrowed space. I uploaded the last batch of files, renamed folders, and sent a brief email to a contact I hadn't planned on involving yet. No subject line, just a question about next steps. From the living room, a TV show laughed at something no one found funny. A drawer slid shut down the hall. Footsteps moved overhead. I closed the laptop, stood up, and carried it to the bedroom, setting it on the desk where it wouldn't be touched. Before leaving the room, I changed the lock on the door, quiet and precise, then slipped the key into my pocket and headed back down the hall. The email arrived just after lunch, sandwiched between routine updates from work. No name, no explanation, just a subject line that read, "You might want these." Inside were scanned documents I hadn't seen in years. The purchase agreement, the closing disclosure, my signature at the bottom, dated and clear, the lender's stamp, the county seal. I leaned back in my chair, letting the memory come back on its own. Sitting at that long table, pen heavier than it looked, the agent explaining terms I already understood, the quiet relief afterward, knowing I'd put a roof over my family without borrowing more than I could carry. Nothing about those papers was vague. I forwarded the files to myself, then saved them again to a drive I kept separate. No rush, no reaction, just methodical steps, the same way I handled problems at work when they mattered too much for guesswork. Later that afternoon, Marcus texted, "Coffee? Decatur." I left the office early and drove over without replying. The place was half full, quiet enough to talk without lowering voices. He ordered first, then slid a cup across to me without asking how I took it. He remembered. "You look different," he said. Tired in a more specific way. He nodded like that made sense. They push harder when they feel something slipping. I told him about the email. Didn't show him the documents, just described them. He listened without interrupting, hands folded around his cup. "This isn't about family anymore," he said. "It probably never was. Feels like betrayal when it comes from inside the house. Power rarely announces itself that way. It dresses up as concern." I watched someone at the counter argue over a receipt. The conversation felt ordinary, grounding. "You can keep trying to calm the water," Marcus continued, "or you can step out and see who's actually standing on your back to stay dry. And if I'm wrong, then you'll still have clarity. That's worth more than pretending." We finished our drinks without adding much else. No pep talk, no warning. He stood first, checked his watch. "Whatever you decide, don't half do it." Back home, the atmosphere had hardened. Conversations stopped when I entered. Plans were made without looping me in. A family group chat I rarely used went silent on my end. Later, I found out it hadn't gone silent at all. I just wasn't included anymore. My wife moved through the house carefully, like every step required permission. When I asked about dinner plans, she said her mother had already decided. Decided for who? For everyone. That night, I overheard a phone call from the hallway. My name came up, paired with phrases like unstable and financially irresponsible. The story had evolved. Now I wasn't just ungrateful. I was a risk. I didn't confront it. Instead, I opened my laptop and organized what I had. Documents sorted by date, notes matched to times, messages archived. I checked public records online, pulled the county listing, and saved the page as a PDF. The facts lined up in a way rumors couldn't undo. Another message arrived before midnight. Different address, shorter note. "They're telling people you don't own anything. Thought you should know." I closed the laptop and sat there for a while. The house made its usual sounds around me. Someone laughed in another room. A door opened, then shut. Safety had become a performance. I could keep playing along, nodding, shrinking, hoping the storm would pass. Or I could accept that the storm was being manufactured and act accordingly. In the bedroom, I packed a small bag. Not dramatic, just practical. Clothes for a few days. The folder with copies of everything. I left the rest where it was. Before stepping out, I paused at the desk and sent one more email. This one had a subject line, ownership verification. The reply didn't come right away. That was fine. I zipped the bag, slipped on my jacket, and walked back through the hallway. No one asked where I was going. No one stopped me. The front door opened easily, like it always had, and I stepped outside with the bag in my hand, already dialing the next number as I pulled it shut behind me. The hotel room didn't feel temporary or permanent. It just existed. A place where no one knocked. No one rearranged my things. No one spoke for me. I slept a few hours, woke before dawn, and sat at the small desk with my laptop open, reviewing what I already knew was solid. By mid-morning, I was downtown. The law office sat between two newer buildings, nothing fancy. The kind of place that relied on quiet consistency rather than signs or slogans. The attorney didn't rush me. He listened, flipped through copies, and asked questions that cut straight to structure instead of emotion. "You purchased the property alone," he said, tapping a page. "Title is clean. Mortgage is in your name. Taxes match. Then why does it feel like I'm trespassing?" He gave a thin smile. Because ownership and control aren't the same thing, but the law only recognizes one of them. We went through everything: closing documents, payment history, transfers. I reconstructed the flow of money month by month, tracing it the same way I would track inventory movement at work. Nothing disappeared. Nothing overlapped incorrectly. Every path led back to me. They don't have standing, he said finally, but they do have access. That's where the damage happens. Outside, the sidewalk buzzed with lunchtime traffic. People moved with purpose, heading somewhere specific. I stood there longer than necessary before getting back in the car. The next few days followed a rhythm I didn't share with anyone. Mornings at work, evenings split between the hotel and my laptop, calls made from the parking lot so voices wouldn't carry. I forwarded statements to the attorney, answered questions, clarified timelines. The anger faded without me noticing. In its place came focus. That focus sharpened when the messages started. Unknown numbers, short lines. You should let this go. Families solve things privately. Don't embarrass everyone. I didn't respond. I saved them, noted the times. Screenshots went into the folder. One night, as I walked back from grabbing food, a car slowed behind me longer than traffic required. It rolled past, then circled the block. Could have been coincidence. Might not have been. I memorized the plate anyway. At work, someone asked if I was okay. Not prying, just checking. I'm handling something personal, I said. You need coverage? Not yet. I stayed late again, pulling transaction records from years back. A familiar calm settled in, the kind that comes when problems stop being abstract. Facts behaved, people didn't. At home, I heard updates secondhand. My wife had told relatives I was overwhelmed, that I needed space, that it was best if decisions were centralized, for now. The phrase carried weight it didn't earn. Marcus called one evening. You moving carefully? He asked. Always have. Careful's good, just don't confuse it with slow. I didn't explain what I'd already set in motion. He didn't ask. By the end of the week, my attorney confirmed what we'd already discussed. If they escalate, we respond, not before. And if they don't, then you decide how long you're willing to live in the in-between. That night, I drove past the house instead of stopping. Lights were on. Someone laughed inside. A car I didn't recognize sat in the driveway. I kept going. Another message buzzed in as I merged onto the highway. Police will get involved if you keep pushing. I read it once, then saved it with the others. At the hotel, I laid everything out across the desk. Printed copies stacked neatly. Digital backups confirmed. I rehearsed nothing. I didn't need a speech. Sleep came easier than before, not because things were settled, but because they were no longer drifting. The next morning, I walked into the office and requested a day off for the following week. No explanation required. I'd earned that. In the afternoon, my phone rang. A number I recognized but hadn't heard from in a while. They're upset, my wife said. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. It's already big. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not trying to. Silence stretched between us. Not angry, just distant. When are you coming home? I'll let you know. After the call, I sat in the car for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. The city moved around me like it always did. Horns, sirens, ordinary noise. Another text arrived. This one from a number I didn't have saved. You don't belong there anymore. I locked the phone and slipped it into the console. The engine started smoothly. As I pulled out, a thought settled in, quiet but certain. Someone was getting impatient, and impatience makes people sloppy. I drove back toward the hotel, already reviewing dates in my head, lining them up with what I knew was coming, the next move forming without needing to be announced. I was unlocking the front door when the patrol car rolled up behind me. No sirens, just lights cutting across the driveway, washing over the porch like they owned it. I paused with the key halfway turned, already knowing who had made the call. Sir, can you step away from the door? I did what he asked, hands visible, calm. That reflex had been trained into me over years of managing messes that didn't belong to me. What's going on? I said. The other officer checked his tablet. We received a report of an unauthorized person attempting to enter the residence. Unauthorized. The words sat wrong in my mouth. This is my home. They exchanged a look that wasn't hostile, just procedural. That's what we're here to sort out. The door opened before I could say more. My mother-in-law stood there, robe pulled tight, eyes already wet. She didn't look at me. She looked past me, toward the neighbors who had begun to gather without pretending otherwise. "That's him," she said. "He doesn't live here anymore." My wife hovered behind her, face pale, lips pressed together. My son wasn't visible. "Ma'am," one officer said, "we'll need to hear from everyone." "He left," she continued. "He's been unstable. We were afraid." Afraid. Another costume for power. "Sir, do you have identification?" I handed it over, wallet steady, breath even. "Do you have documentation proving residency?" "Yes," I said. "I can provide it." "Not right now," she cut in. "He's lying. He doesn't own anything here." The street had gone quiet. Someone across the way held a phone too high to be casual. A dog barked and was pulled back inside. The officer turned back to me. "Can you step over here for a moment?" I followed them to the edge of the driveway. Questions came in measured tones. Where had I been staying? Why had I left? Did I have proof of ownership on me? I answered without filling gaps, without defending myself beyond the facts. My hands shook once, just once, when they asked if I had anywhere else to go if things didn't resolve tonight. Yes. The lie came out clean. The hotel existed, but the question carried weight it didn't need. They spoke with her again. She cried harder this time, voice breaking at the right moments. She said my name like it hurt to say it. She said family, a lot. She said safety, even more. I stood there and felt something cold move through me. Not anger. Fear, maybe. The kind that doesn't rush, that just sits heavy and reminds you what you could lose. "Sir," the officer said finally, "we can't determine ownership on the spot. This is a civil matter." "Then he has to leave," she insisted. "I'm scared." "Ma'am, he has the right to access unless a court says otherwise." Her face tightened. The script had run out. "We recommend everyone take space tonight," the officer added. "Cool things down." They handed me back my ID. No cuffs, no charges. Just a suggestion that felt like a verdict. As they drove away, the porch light clicked on. My mother-in-law watched me without blinking. My wife looked between us like she'd misplaced something important and couldn't remember where. "You see what you're doing?" her mother said. "You're humiliating us." I didn't answer. I walked past them, up the steps, and into the house. No one stopped me. Inside, the living room smelled like something burned and covered up. A chair scraped as someone moved. My son appeared at the hallway entrance, eyes wide. "Dad?" "I'm here." He didn't come closer. He didn't need to. In the bedroom, the lock I'd changed earlier was gone. Replaced. The desk drawers sat open, contents disturbed. I checked the closet. The folder was missing. My chest tightened then, sharp and sudden. The thought came uninvited. What if they could actually take this from me? What if silence had already done too much damage? I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, breathing through it. The house hummed around me, alive with people who spoke my name like it belonged to them. Footsteps stopped at the door. "You should leave for tonight," my wife said, "just until things settle." "Things won't settle on their own. Please." I stood up slowly, not to argue, to move. In the kitchen, I grabbed my keys from the hook where they always hung. Someone had added a second set beside them. I noticed that too. At the door, I turned back once, not to say anything, just to look. The house looked the same. Familiar walls, familiar corners. Nothing reflected back at me. Outside, the night air felt thinner. My phone buzzed as I stepped off the porch. A message from my attorney, time-stamped minutes earlier. "Call me as soon as you can." I walked to the car, thumb already pressing the screen. The image of the officers' faces still hovering somewhere behind my eyes. And as the line connected, I leaned against the hood and listened for the voice on the other end. The attorney's office smelled like paper and old coffee. I arrived early, sat without opening my phone, and waited until the door across the hall opened. He stepped out carrying a slim folder, thicker than it looked. "We heard back this morning." He didn't hand it to me right away. He sat down first, placed it between us, then slid it across the table. Inside were certified copies from the county recorder's office, deed history, transfer records. My name appeared where it always had. No gaps, no shared ownership, no amendments slipped in quietly. "There's more," he said. A second document followed, an affidavit, signed, notarized. "Who's this from?" "The closing agent. She still works in the area." Remembered the transaction clearly. I did. She'd worn glasses that slid down her nose every time she looked up, had a habit of tapping the pen twice before handing it over. "She confirmed you were the sole buyer," he continued. "No power of attorney, no co-signer, no contingencies beyond standard lending." My chest loosened a notch. Not relief, recognition. "That doesn't stop them from talking," I said. "No, but it changes how much their words matter." Outside, traffic moved steadily. I gathered the papers, aligning edges, folding nothing. "They'll keep denying it," he added. "Expect that. They already are." On the drive back, my phone buzzed more than once, messages stacked without opening. A voicemail came through from a number I recognized but hadn't saved. "You're tearing this family apart," my mother-in-law's voice said. "We've done nothing wrong." I didn't delete it. I saved it with the others. At the hotel, I spread everything across the bed. Contract, deed, statements, affidavit. The pattern was impossible to miss once laid flat. Each attempt to push me out relied on one assumption, that I wouldn't check, wouldn't verify, wouldn't push back. That assumption had kept them comfortable. A call came in from my wife. I answered without greeting. "They say you're lying about the paperwork. They can say whatever they want." They showed people screenshots. Of what? Things taken out of context. Old emails, partial statements. None of that changes ownership. Silence held for a moment. I could hear someone else in the room with her, breathing too close to the phone. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. I'm responding. "You don't have to humiliate anyone. I'm not the one calling the police." The line went quiet again. When she spoke next, her voice sounded smaller. "They're scared." So was I. After the call, I logged into the county website once more and printed the public record page, date stamped. I scanned it and emailed it to my attorney, then to myself. I didn't send it to anyone else. That night, another message came in. "You don't own that house. We've confirmed it." I looked at the words without reacting, saved them, added a note, false claim, time-stamped. In the morning, Marcus met me outside the coffee shop this time. No small talk. "You look steadier," he said. "Found what I needed." That usually changes things. I think they know it too. He nodded, glancing at his watch. People push hardest right before they lose leverage. Back in the car, I replayed everything from the beginning. The locked door, the opened mail, the controlled accounts. Each move relied on access, not authority. Influence, not right. At the house later that afternoon, I didn't go inside. I parked down the street and watched as a car pulled into the driveway. Someone unfamiliar stepped out, carrying a folder. Another relative, maybe. Another voice to reinforce a story. I made a call instead. "Let's proceed," I said when my attorney answered. "Understood. I'll notify the other party." "Do it formally." "Already drafting." I hung up and sat there a moment longer, hands resting on the wheel. My phone buzzed again, this time with a group message I hadn't been included in before. "We need to talk before this gets worse." I typed nothing back. As I pulled away from the curb, a thought settled in with clarity that didn't need repeating. Their strength had always come from noise, from crowding, from making doubt louder than fact. Now the facts had a voice, and they were about to hear it. The meeting didn't happen at the house. That mattered more than anyone said out loud. It took place at the precinct, a small conference room off the main hall where voices carried if they rose too much. 2 officers sat near the door, neutral and alert. My attorney arrived first, nodded once, and laid his folder on the table without opening it. They came in together a few minutes later. My mother-in-law led, shoulders squared, eyes already glassy. My wife followed, hands clasped tight, not looking at me. A relative I barely knew trailed behind, there to witness something they believed would go their way. "We're here to clear up a misunderstanding," my mother-in-law said before anyone asked her to speak. One of the officers raised a hand. "We'll take turns." She sat down hard, exhaling like she'd been carrying the weight of the room on her own. "He doesn't live there anymore," she said, pointing at me. "He abandoned the house. He's been unstable. We were scared for our safety." I didn't react. My attorney didn't either. "Ma'am," the officer said, "we need facts, not character assessments. The facts are, he doesn't own that property." "How do you know?" She hesitated, then recovered quickly. "Because family handles these things together. He was never the primary decision maker." My attorney opened his folder then, just enough to pull one document free. He slid it across the table without commentary. "That's the recorded deed," he said. "County certified." She glanced at it and pushed it back. "That can't be right." "It is. He manipulated paperwork. He always does." The officer picked up the page and scanned it. Another followed. Quiet filled the room, broken only by the shuffle of paper. "There's more," my attorney added, passing over the affidavit. My mother-in-law's voice sharpened. "This is harassment. He's trying to embarrass us." "No one asked for this meeting but you," the officer said. She turned toward my wife. "Tell them. You know how he is." My wife looked up at me then, eyes searching for something familiar. I didn't offer it. "The house was bought before we married," she said finally. "I wasn't there that day." "Did you ever see documentation transferring ownership?" the officer asked. "No." "Did you sign anything granting authority?" "No." The relatives shifted in their seat. "But she lived there," they said. "That has to count for something." "It doesn't establish ownership," the officer replied. My mother-in-law's breathing grew uneven. "So you're just taking his side?" "We're following records." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "He's threatening us. We have messages." "We'd like to see them." She scrolled, handed it over. The officer read, expression unchanged. "These are requests for documentation and notice of counsel." "Exactly. Threats." "Ma'am, that's not what a threat is." My attorney slid one last stack across the table. Bank statements, payment history, dates highlighted. "Every mortgage payment originated from his account," he said. "No interruptions, no third-party transfers." Silence held longer this time. "You don't understand what he's done to this family," she said, voice breaking on cue. "We took him in, we helped him, and this is how he repays us." "By paying for the house?" the officer asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. The room felt smaller, not because of tension, but because there was nowhere left to expand the story. The facts had taken up all the space. "Based on what we have," the officer said, "ownership is clear. Any attempt to remove him or restrict access without a court order could constitute harassment." My mother-in-law stood abruptly. "So that's it?" "That's it." She turned toward me, eyes burning now. "I hope you can live with yourself." I met her gaze without answering. Outside the room, the hall hummed with routine movement. Phones rang, doors opened and closed. My attorney gathered his papers. "We'll follow up in writing," he said to the officers. They nodded. My wife lingered behind as everyone else moved ahead. "You didn't have to do it like this," she said. "This is how it got done." She looked down, then away. "What happens now?" "I go home." She didn't stop me. In the parking lot, the air felt ordinary. Cars pulled in and out. Someone laughed nearby. I walked past my mother-in-law without slowing. She stood by a car with the door open, talking fast into her phone, already shaping the next version. I reached my car and opened the door. The seat felt familiar in a way the house hadn't for weeks. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, letting the noise fade. My phone buzzed. A message from my attorney. "We'll file the notice this afternoon." I replied with a single word. "Proceed." The engine started smoothly. As I pulled out, I didn't look back at the building or the people standing beside it. Traffic carried me forward, steady and unremarkable, and I merged into it without forcing my way in, letting the day continue as if nothing unusual had happened. The house was quieter than I remembered. Not empty, just stripped of the noise that had been filling it for months. I let myself in without announcing it, and set my keys on the counter where they used to belong. The lock had been changed back. My attorney had made sure of that. Court notices tend to do what conversations can't. I walked through the room slowly, not out of sentiment, but to take inventory. Some things were missing. Others had been moved. Nothing surprised me anymore. What stayed with me was the realization that I'd learned to measure my steps in a place I paid for, adjusting my presence so others wouldn't feel threatened. That habit hadn't started here. It had followed me from somewhere older. In the bedroom, the desk drawers were finally closed. My folder sat where I'd left it days earlier, untouched now that touching it carried consequences. I slid it into my bag anyway. Paper has weight. It reminds people where lines are drawn. My phone buzzed while I packed. A message from my attorney confirmed what I already knew. They've been advised to vacate by the end of the week. Any interference, call me. I thanked him and set the phone down. Down the hall, voices rose briefly, then cut off when they realized I was there. My wife stood in the doorway, arms folded tight against herself. "They're leaving tomorrow," she said. "Good. You didn't have to do all of this. I didn't start it." She looked at the floor, then back up. "Where does that leave us?" I zipped the bag. "It leaves me standing." She waited for more. It didn't come. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly. The routine steadied me. My mother-in-law wasn't there. She hadn't been since the meeting. I heard she'd told people she was humiliated, that she'd been betrayed, that she'd never felt so exposed. The story had shifted again. It always did when control slipped. I carried the bag to the front door and set it down. Before leaving, I walked back to the living room and picked up a framed photo from the shelf. My son and me at a baseball game years ago, his arm around my shoulder, smiling without hesitation. I tucked it into the bag too. Outside, the afternoon moved along like it always had. A delivery truck idled down the street. Someone waved at a neighbor. Normal life didn't pause for private reckonings. Marcus called as I loaded the car. "Heard it wrapped up." It did. "You okay?" I considered the question. "Clear. That counts." After hanging up, I sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. The fear I'd been carrying finally showed itself for what it was. Not fear of conflict, fear of being left, of standing alone without a role to fill. I'd mistaken endurance for loyalty, silence for strength. That equation didn't work anymore. A final text came through from my wife. "Can we talk later?" I read it once, then turned the phone face down. Maybe someday, not today. I stepped out of the car one last time and went back inside. On the counter, I placed the house keys neatly side by side, not as a gesture, as a boundary. I took the spare from my pocket and left that too. In the hallway, my son appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder. "You leaving?" "Yeah. Will you come back?" I knelt so we were eye level. "I'll always be around, just not here." He nodded, absorbing it in his own way. "Call me later," he said. "I will." That was enough. I stood, walked out, and closed the door behind me. No speech followed. No final look. The engine turned over, and I pulled away from the curb without rushing. At the end of the street, I checked the mirror once. The house sat where it always had, unchanged. It didn't matter anymore. Traffic opened up, and I took it. The road didn't promise anything. It didn't need to. As the miles added themselves quietly, I reached over and adjusted the seat, set the radio to low, and drove on, hands steady, letting the space ahead do what it was meant to do.